What does it mean to abide? Jesus says, "Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them." In the fundamentalist Protestant faith that I grew up in, there was a phrase that was often repeated: "I must decrease so God might increase." It comes from John the Baptist in John chapter 3. But that verse was isolated from the rest of the gospel, and it was interpreted in ways that weren't helpful. As a child, I was told worshiping God was serious business. Worship wasn't fun, and you weren't supposed to enjoy yourself. I had to conform to this image of what it meant to be a quote unquote good Christian, which felt like fitting a circle into a square. My individuality, who I wanted to be when I grew up, delighting in being a kid, was seen at best a distraction and at worst a sin from what really mattered. I must decrease so that God may increase. Except that interpretation forgot about what Jesus says later in John when he talks about abiding. Abiding doesn't mean a competition. It doesn't mean God's presence has to fight for space with my presence. Because God is on a completely different plane of existence from you and I. God can exist and be fully present while I, myself, am fully present as well. Jesus says, "Those who eat my flesh and drink my blood abide in me, and I in them." This word abide comes up repeatedly in John. Jesus says it later when he talks about the image of the vine, and he tells the disciples, "Abide in me as I abide in you." Jesus says that just as each vine branch receives life by being connected to the lifeblood of the vine, so each of our lives are possible because of the lifeblood we have from Jesus. Jesus is internal to who we are. It's like if you took a vine, you stretched it out, and you said, "Okay, this section right here, that is me. And this section of the vine, that's God." You wouldn't be able to do it because it's all one. It all flows together. Jesus is just as much a part of us as we are a part of Jesus. So you can't really say, "I must decrease so God may increase," if that means there's a competition between the two. Because it can be two 100%. I know this is not math, but we can be fully 100% present while God is fully 100% present as well. Sometimes in my work as a hospice chaplain, I meet with people who are transitioning, and I witness a lot of beautiful things that happen through me, sometimes in despite of me, some things through my patients, through their family. And is it me? Is it them? Is it God? Well, what if it's all the above? What if both can be true? These God moments, as I like to call them, it can be that you can't separate them. You can't put God in a box and say, "Well, this part just right here, that's God, and this part right here is just me," because God is in all of it. It's like the vine that we're connected. We're constantly flowing. We're constantly receiving life from God. I also think about the spiritual journey that each of us is on in this room. I used to look back at who I was, say, 10 years ago and say, wow, I've changed so much since then. And that's true. And sometimes I would describe these experiences as transformative in a way that I'm a completely different person from who I was back then. But as I've grown, I've come to say not that I'm a completely different person from who I was back then, but rather it's that I'm more myself now than I was back then. I'm more at home in my own skin. I'm more at home with my gifts and my brokenness of the things that I'm good at and the things that I'm not good at. I know what brings me joy and what doesn't. So is it spiritual growth or is it self-help? Well, it's kind of a little bit of both because God is in all of it. God is moving in us and helping us to each grow into the people that embody God's love to the world. And Jesus says that as we gather around this altar, that we abide in him and he in us. As we eat Jesus' flesh and blood, he abides in our hearts. And as the Gospel of John says, we become united as one with Christ and are formed into one body. This doesn't mean that we disappear. It doesn't mean that we're somehow absorbed into God and we cease to exist. But it's that we become united in our differences, in our individual uniqueness. It's almost like a mosaic. You know, each colorful piece is its own thing, but they all come together. And when you look back, you can see an image. And I think that that's also something that we can contemplate this morning, the ways that we, each of us, don't disappear, but we each, we bring something of beauty to Christ's body, that we embody that love. So may you, as you come around this altar, may you reflect on the mystery of Christ's presence among us, Christ's gathering of us here. One bread, one body, one Lord of all, one cup of blessing which we bless. Amen.